Which anime should you watch this season? There's a ton of great anime this season between Demon Slayer, Konosuba, and a bunch of new shows. So just as with every season, you face the inevitable question of which anime should I watch right now? Well, as someone who's been waiting for more than a few of these anime, I narrowed it down to 5 picks. So to start off this list, let's start with the anime everyone will be watching, Demon Slayer. Admittedly, Demon Slayer Season 3 was nothing crazy. Some of the scenes had some cool animation, and in general, there are a number of really cool scenes. But generally speaking, Season 3 was nothing compared to Season 2. I mean, it's pretty hard to beat Entertainment District. So when you hear that Season 4 will be a training arc, you might be discouraged. But trust me, there's a lot to be excited for in Season 4. First off, I would just like to say that Season 4 will probably include more than just the Hashira training. The Hashira training is only about 10 chapters, meaning that it will probably only consist of about 3 or 4 episodes. At that rate, it's hard to believe that they won't at least start the Infinity Castle arc that comes right after. But even ignoring that, there's going to be a lot to like about Hashira training. First off, if you're a fan of the heart of Demon Slayer aside from the fights, then you will love this arc. This arc goes back to the roots of Demon Slayer and showcases a fair bit of comedy. With all of the characters at the mansion training, there's a lot of funny interactions and a lot of comedic scenes that will probably remind you of the end of Season 1. But besides that, there's also a lot of emotional scenes, which is obviously a big thing in Demon Slayer. Without giving too many spoilers, all I will say is that naturally, these emotional scenes revolve around the Hashira. We get some character growth for Gyu, a continuation of the bitterness between Genya and Sanemi. So if you love those characters, you'll probably love this season. And we finally get the backstory of Himejima, the Stone Hashira. Again, I won't say too much, but just know that these are some of the most emotional scenes in the series, and they set up a lot of character moments in the next arc. On that note, this arc in general builds up a lot of the tension for the upcoming fights, and while you may have heard mixed reviews of the Demon Slayer ending, just know that Infinity Castle has the best fights in the entire series, even better than the Entertainment District arc. So with those fights probably showing up in Season 4 as well as a lot of emotional scenes, there's plenty of reason to make sure you catch up for Demon Slayer Season 4. Now before I move on to the next pick, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. Anyway, now that we've covered an anime icon, let's move on to one of the new shows this year. While this series may seem weird at first, I can honestly say there's nothing like it. There's a couple names for this show, but most people go by the original, Ranger Reject. Ranger Reject is a story that should feel familiar to anyone that's seen the Power Rangers. In fact, it should feel a little too familiar when you buy the manga in English and see that it's titled Go Go Loser Ranger. The reason for this is that Ranger Reject borrows a lot of the tropes of Power Rangers and shows like it. The story opens by explaining how the Rangers have an agreement with the Invaders, a group of aliens that originally came to Earth to conquer the world. When the Invaders were nearly wiped out, the leaders of the Rangers agreed that the Invaders could stay as long as they let the Rangers win in scripted fights every Sunday. This goes on for years before D, one of the grunts in the villain army, decides that he's sick of the status quo and wants to take the Rangers down for good. As a result, he disguises himself as a human and infiltrates the Rangers. As you can probably tell by now, Ranger Reject stands out for the simple fact that it takes a lot of these tropes and flips them on their head. For example, the Rangers are usually the good guys, and that's the way they're viewed in the society of Ranger Reject. But in reality, this really isn't the case. Not only are they the antagonists, but most of the Rangers are unhinged lunatics who will kill whoever they want, however they want, in the name of so-called justice. Besides the unique perspective, Ranger Reject is genuinely an all-around great story. D is a goofy character who has some tact but is kind of figuring it out along the way, making him painfully relatable. The humor in the series is always on point, especially when D is around. And it's generally just a badass story with all kinds of crazy fights and even crazier transformations and power suits. Now, as far as the animation, the manga is being adapted by Yoestar Pictures. The studio is just under 4 years old and doesn't have that many shows under their belt, so this will be their first time animating a big-name manga. So to make sure you don't miss out on a new studio and a new show that fans have been dying to see animated, I highly recommend watching Ranger Reject this season. But now that we've talked about my hero, and Ranger Reject, let's take a break from the battle series and talk about the rom-com I'll be watching this season, Mission Yozakura Family. If you read Shonen Jump, then you know Mission Yozakura Family has been around for a while. The series is over 200 chapters long and is only just getting an anime adaptation, but it still has a hardcore fanbase to this day, and for good reason. Mission Yozakura Family follows the story of Taiyo. He lost his entire family in a car accident when he was younger. Afterward, his school friend Mitsumi promised to always be his friend and stay close to him. Unfortunately, that doesn't really help because as time goes on, Taiyo isn't really able to make friends or be open with others. However, when their teacher, who turns out to be Mitsumi's sister, vows to get rid of Taiyo in order to protect Mitsumi, Taiyo must seek the protection of Mitsumi's siblings. Funny enough, he finds out that Mitsumi's family consists entirely of spies, and the only way to stop the older brother is to marry into the Yozakura family and become a spy. As you can see, Mission Yozakura Family is a bit over the top. As a rom-com, it can get pretty silly, but as a spy thriller, there's also a ton of action and intense missions that the characters go on. Throw in crazy villains and weird mysteries, and you can see why people want to binge all 200 plus chapters. But while that's all good and fine, what people really love about this manga are the characters. When you watch this anime, you'll quickly come to find that this is a real family. You'll make strong connections to each character as you begin to feel their very real connections as a family. As a result, you'll invest in these characters as they grow as a family together. On a final note, I can't really speak to the studio for this anime. It's being done by Silverlink, which you may recognize if you saw Ragna Crimson or the new Hokkaido Gals anime, but based on the trailer, it looks like this will be a decent looking anime. So for that reason and more, please make sure to check out Mission Yozakura Family. Now, as funny as this series is, it isn't nearly as funny as the next one. In case you haven't already guessed by now, that series is Konosuba. Everyone who's heard of Konosuba knows it for its notorious crackhead energy and degenerate characters. Konosuba follows the story of Kazuma, a major nerd who was reincarnated in a fantasy world. His party members consist of Aqua, an alcoholic mage who used to be a goddess before she was dragged down along with Kazuma, Darkness, a noble who left her home so she could fulfill her dreams of adventure, and masochism. And there's Megumin, the demon girl who refuses to cast anything other than her infamous destruction spell. Obviously, these wacky characters make for some insane chemistry, as Konosuba not only leans into its tropes, but pushes them to levels that are just plain dumb. And that's why we love this show. Besides the tropes, Konosuba is genuinely funny at just about every turn. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of shows that could make me laugh at an adult dramatically rejecting a little girl's invitation to join a religious cult. That kind of comedy is only achievable thanks to Kazuma. While he is redeemable, Kazuma is far from your typical hero. He's a degenerate nerd who would rather use shortcuts. He's a major pervert, and he's the kind of guy to punch a female villain and say he did it in the name of feminism. As you can tell, the degenerate comedy you'll see in Konosuba is thanks to Kazuma and the way he makes the show stand out. Obviously, one reason to watch Konosuba is because of this insane comedy, but another reason is because it's going to be the most talked about anime of the season. Konosuba has been a meme machine ever since its first episode, and Konosuba fans never need an excuse to talk about it. So once season 3 starts, you're going to see your Twitter feed flooded with reactions and Konosuba memes. If you don't want to be that person who isn't caught up, or you just want to check it out so you're not constantly annoyed by everyone talking about it all the time, then make sure to follow each episode of Konosuba Season 3. But now that we've talked about 2 comedies in a row, let's talk about the final battle series on this list. A battle series that might just be the most important one this season. That series is Kaiju number 8. Kaiju number 8 is easily one of the most popular series in the last couple of years. It follows the story of Kafka, a guy who dreamed of joining the Special Defense Force in order to fight kaiju. But when he failed his exams, he resorted to a life of cleaning up after kaiju battles. But when he's suddenly taken over by a kaiju and becomes a weird kaiju hybrid, he decides to rekindle his dreams and join the Special Defense Force. So the story shows you Kafka's journey as he learns to fight kaiju and works hard to fulfill his dreams that he thought were impossible. Obviously, there's a ton of crazy looking kaiju, but there's also a ton of cool characters. There's Shinomiya, the elite who fights people with a giant axe. There's Hoshina, the guy who fights kaiju with samurai swords like a ninja. There's also Mina Ashiro, the girl with a pet tiger who fights kaiju with a giant sniper rifle. As you can probably imagine, these characters lead to some pretty crazy fights. And these fights have led to the series' huge success. Admittedly, the manga hasn't been as popular as when it started. People still read it religiously, but there hasn't been as much hype. But that will all change when the anime comes out. As a matter of fact, there's going to be a ton of people hyping up this anime as they love the manga, so they want to see the anime do well. Unfortunately, this doesn't look like a guarantee. As some of the new designs have definitely improved, a lot of the teasers for this show are a bit discouraging to say the least. I went more in depth on this in a previous video, but the director of this anime has done a ton of work on the Naruto movies, so we can at least expect the action scenes to look really good. Besides that, we'll just have to wait and see, which is exactly what people are going to do. With tons of fans invested in the success of this series, Kaiju number 8 could easily be the most watched and talked about anime this season. So if you want to see what all of the hype is about, then I highly recommend you make Kaiju number 8 one of your weekly shows, in addition to all of my other picks for the 2024 spring season. And that's it. Those are my picks for the spring season. Now I'd like to hear what you think. What are you gonna watch this season? What do you think of my list? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like to see more discussions like this one, then make sure to check out that Kaiju number 8 video I mentioned. In that video, I explain why the Kaiju number 8 manga isn't as great as it used to be. You can find that video in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.